That is a fun tune. My thanks to Peter Trulin for piping in those beats for the Rec Poker podcast intro and outro. That's right. It's the Rec Poker podcast, folks. Thanks for joining us for another week of the Forums edition. I'm your host, Jim Reed, Blusterini in the home game and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter or Threads. I've got the best freaking job in the world. Every Monday, I get to hang out here and talk poker strategy with my friends. This is because we are brought to you by the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. We wouldn't be anywhere without their support because Rec Poker is a largely volunteer-based organization. Most of what we do here is free. And so having sponsors like Running Aces makes a big difference. And we also really rely on the patronage and support of our Wrecking Crew members. This is the group of folks that put in their time day and week and month in and out to put the videos together, do our editing, put the curriculum together, show up on the podcast, run our study groups, our book studies, share their poker thoughts with the world. There's a million ways to get involved with the Wrecking Crew. And if you want to find out more about me or the rest of the crew, you can just go to rec.poker/crew. But listen up because you're going to meet a few of them here tonight on the air as well.
My name is Ben Enslow. BJamin96 on Twitch. You can find all my stuff over there, my socials, and I'm East Coast Bidder in the home game.
My name is Joe Coolis. You can find me on Twitter at JoeCoolPhD, cool with a K, or as Elvita11 in the home game.
And I'm Taylor Moss. You can find me at Taylor_Moss on Twitter or Gopher Boy, TJM in the Rec Poker home game.
Well, thanks for joining me, fellas. This is the Forums edition, so we're going to be talking about strategy. This is a question that actually came up on our recent Rec Poker road trip to Running Aces. We had Rec Poker weekend out there in August, had a fantastic time. Last week, we talked about a question from Lawrence, at least I hope it was Lawrence. This week, we're going to be talking about a question from Chris, and I'm sure it's Chris because he was sitting directly on my left for a few hours, and we had a bunch of good conversations, and he bought me a couple of beers. So thank you, Chris. That was a wonderful time. And this is a question that I'll put it in my own words, but this is a question that Chris put to me, talking about mental game. In fact, Joe, your name came up in the discussion, which is why I'm glad you're here for the show here. So Chris is an experienced player, a smart guy, a studied player. I wouldn't say that he had any sort of obvious leaks. He didn't have a problem with mental game. He wasn't going on tilt or anything like that. We played together for several hours. Of course, we all get a little saucy when we get a bad beat every once in a while, but I thought he was well within the guardrails for all that kind of stuff. And the question that he had said, listen, I'm a thoughtful player. I've studied the game. I'm experienced. Every once in a while, I just find myself in a hand and I've just made some terrible mistake. As though I wasn't thinking about the right things at the right time, as though I just sort of snapped out of a daze and had made this kind of terrible mistake. Does that happen to other people? And how can I protect myself from this kind of situation? And the way that we were talking about it made it feel like you sort of you just sort of run out of focus of after a while. You're sitting there at the table, you're making difficult poker decision after difficult poker decision. And, you sort of stop paying attention, or maybe you lose track of where you are in the tournament. And you just kind of make a snap decision about something. And now it's too late, which is particularly a problem for MTTs. So I'm sure this is something that we've all experienced. But Joe, you're the expert when it comes to how the mind and brain operate, at least on this panel. So what can you say about that kind of scenario?
Well, I have many thoughts, but the first and foremost for Chris is, well, welcome to the club. I mean, that's if anybody on the panel has avoided that, then they're better at this stuff than I am. I think the way to think about it is, so I'm a football fan, and quarterbacks come and go within the league. And what you find is they're always talking about the decision-making of the quarterback, right? How is this quarterback making decisions? And they make some good decisions and they make some bad decisions. The great ones eventually continually make better and better decisions until they're eliminating the bad decisions that they have. And I don't think there are any quarterbacks that make no bad decisions. Everybody's always going to make some decisions, but as we get better in whatever skills that we're trying to develop, we develop something called fluency. Fluency is like an automaticity, right? It's being able to do something without thinking and being able to manage it on an automatic level. And the better that we get at a skill like football or poker, then the more those decisions will come without thinking about it. But the truth of the matter is that we're just always going to make those mistakes. And our goal is to really think about, one, to give ourselves a break, but two, to say, what I want to do is continually improve my game such that I make fewer of those mistakes as I continue to play. And if you're doing that, then you're accomplishing it, whether or not you call a bet that you shouldn't have, that you look back and say, "Oh, what big idiot!" Why did I call jacks when there was a queen on the board? Well, because you did, right? And we're all going to make those bad decisions over time. So the question typically is, well, what do you do with it, right? It's like, okay, Mr. Psychologist, who cares, right? You're just saying you haven't really helped me. I think the best thing that you can do is narrow the range of things that you're trying to work on in any individual tournament. If you're going to do this for the long term, right? How you perform on any individual hand or any individual tournament is not really related to whether or not you're successful at the game overall. What your goal is to look over a long period of time and say, well, I've made money and I've made good decisions over that time period. So when you go into a tournament, if you go into a cash game, pick something. There's too many things to do all at once. And if you decide you're going to be perfect in everything, well, you're going to fail at that. Okay. So pick a skill that you want to continue to develop so that you can build that skill over and over and over again. It's like shooting free throws, right? Shoot the free throw, shoot the free throw. If you continue to shoot free throws, eventually it becomes automatic and it'll increase. So do that with your poker skill, right? Making sure that within any decision where you have an all in, that you're making either go through a list people will talk about, or you're making sure you're looking at the opponents to the left before you make a bet, whatever it is that you decide, so that you get into this kind of habit, this groove of that becomes the automatic thing that you do. Once something is automatic, you move to the next skill. And that way, then you always can see that you're making progress in one particular area. And the game, as they say, will slow down because you're not trying to think about too many things all at once. You're only focusing on the specific things that you can manage. And then you're going to lose money sometimes because you'll make those mistakes, but you'll see yourself as having an easier time. Very recently, I'm starting to get better. I'm a terrible poker player. You can just ask Jim. He'll let you know if you want to. But I had this session where all of a sudden it felt like a meditation. And I don't mean that in terms of the mystical nature, but it just flowed. It's like all of my decisions became easy. I knew what was going to happen. I knew how they were going to play it back. And when I did certain things, it all kind of came together. And I was even hitting my bluffs correctly because I'm like, that's the wrong range. He can't have that card there. I'm going to bet, bam, he folds. And I'm like, yeah. And you'll have those moments from time to time. And that's your A game, right? That's when you're really playing very well, but you just can't expect it all the time. So narrow the focus of what you're going to do when you're not playing that, when you're not in that groove.
Yeah, that's really good advice. If we try and work on too many things at once, we don't actually end up getting better at any of them.
Exactly.
Ben and Taylor, have you been in this position where you're I don't know, Rob Washam talks about this as sort of just take your hand off the mouse kind of a spot. Ben, you unmuted there.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to do online actually than live, because live you have to physically, put the chips in, where online you can just click a button. Like I can just click this mouse and boom, there goes my whole stack in the tournament. And it was just based on that one split second of, I lost focus, or I wasn't, my head wasn't in there, or I was paying attention to another table, or so that has happened to me before. So
yeah, I'm sure.
So that's the one where I have to work. And I think I've gotten a little bit better at myself, is just being able to say, take a minute and just don't be afraid to use that time bank, especially I'm speaking mostly online, because that's mostly what I am as online players. Don't be afraid to use the time bank. It's there for you to use it. Don't think that anyone's going to get upset at you. They're not sitting next to you to get mad at you when you take too long and, pre-flop or whatever, right? Just because you have a big situation on another table, you can give yourself that leeway and not feel that pressure. So that's something that I've had to work on myself. So
Yep. Yeah. Rob always says, take your hand off the mouse. Like I mentioned, I just think that's great advice, whether you're playing online and you should actually take your hand off the mouse before you make any big decision. Or even if you're playing live, just metaphorically, just take your hand off the mouse, just tap the brakes a little there and use your time bank a little and think about it because.
And even as simple as pre-flop, just like even doing that, just being like, okay, what are the stacks? Like, what are the stacks? Just something as simple as that. Like, what are the stacks at the table, especially in PKOs where, and again, I play a lot of PKOs online where there's bounties. And if there's short stacks, it's really important to be paying attention to. So that's something where I'm like, I just take, okay, what are the stacks? And then, okay, now I can fold, I can raise, I can figure out what I'm doing from there.
So that's another thing that's helped me because I'm familiar with this experience that Chris is talking about. And for me, it was just like, give yourself a checklist. Give yourself a checklist where like, these are the things that you have to know at the beginning of every hand. Or like, these are the things that you have to think about before you take any action. And, different people are going to find different tools that work for them. But for me, it was just like, I don't give myself permission to take this action until I've considered these three things. Taylor, you're like, you're a very skilled and accomplished poker player. It's been a while since you got frozen in the moment, I'm sure, but you're familiar with this, what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think this is one that's gotten better for me the more that I keep playing and the more that I'm familiar with different situations. Because I think that's kind of the troublesome part is a lot of this seems to be rooted in frustration or anger with the situation or uncertainty in different things. And then you ultimately like don't know what to do and just act impulsively. And I would say the more that I play, the more I'm used to these types of things, the more I'm used to bad turn cards coming and then still, calling down in a spot where aces should have been good and like, different things like that. And it's like the more you get used to those situations, you're like, this isn't this huge anomaly. This isn't some rare occurrence. I should be aware of these types of things. So I think experience helps a lot with that. And then specifically with that, just like the ability to like talk through and like be able to mentalize the different things that are going on in the hand. Like Ben was talking about, like, what are the stack sizes, but like, what was the action? How am I approaching these different spots? Okay, here's my plan on these turn cards. Here's my plan on those turn cards. And just being able to like mentalize what my game plan is going through it allows me to not get off of my game plan, because a lot of these situations are just you getting off of your game plan. But maybe just start thinking about things ahead of time. Try to plan for the unknown as much as you can, and try and formulate what you're going to be doing. Because then you don't get caught with these rare moments of, I just call, or I just went all in and I knew it was a bad idea, but I still did it.
Yeah, I even had one of those. I had one of those moments this weekend. You might have caught it on this. You might have been in the stream at the moment, Taylor, but there was one where a turn card came and I thought it was a bad turn card. And then I started thinking about my range. I was like, oh, this is a horrible turn card, worst card in the deck. And then I was like, wait a minute. I have that card. That's my card. So just, having that awareness just to not be so caught up in, that's so bad for my actual hand. When in reality, I'm like, when I took a step back, I was like, wait a minute, this is like, I smashed this card. Like, this is me all the way. And now I can just bet and just take the pot down. So, just having that awareness is key in some of those situations. And like, I think the big thing is just stepping back and being like, well, wait a minute, just because this is a bad card for me, it could be a bad card for him too, or them too. So I gotta, I don't know. It's cool. I love, I like that aspect of the game, and learning that kind of thing it's a huge part of poker, and it makes the game fun in a way, I think.
Yeah. And so like use that time bank, explore the decision tree, think about what the options are, and make sure you've got all the information that you need to make good decisions. And the more, and I know Chris, if you're listening, you're already an experienced player, but the more people play, the easier that gets, the more internalized that gets. Now you can spend that brain space thinking about like the exact bet size to use to affect the part of the range that you're mostly trying to target. Like, it just becomes a more sophisticated game when you can sort of let the back of your brain do more of this stuff. But there's a difference between that and just kind of like getting distracted or losing focus or not paying attention. Because Taylor, please.
Oh, I was going to say the other thing that I was going to add in there is like if you're having trouble with these types of things and you're like acting impulsively or making decisions that like you think are bad, talk through your decision. Like, what is your action going to do? Like, hey, I'm going to bet this river and I'm not expecting top pair to fold. And probably going to get some of their second pairs, but I should be able to get their third pairs and worse to fold when I make this river bet. And that is like what you're going to be doing. And if they call you with top pair, don't be like, oh man, what am I doing? No, like that was part of your action. Like if you're going to take an action that you think top pair is going to fold, does your line seem credible? Is your bet sizing also going to accomplish those same types of things? If you're honest with yourself around like, what are you trying to do in this spot? Then it'll go a lot easier for you. You won't be stuck in these unknown situations.
Yeah, well said. So Chris, if you're listening, I hope you found this interesting. Send me an email, jim@rec.poker, and I'll set you up with a free month of premium membership here. Joe runs his mental game. He calls it the Poker PsyOps study group on the third Thursday of every month. It's open to all premium members. And I think you'd benefit from, having some Joe's a clinical neuropsychologist. He's educated and credentialed up the wazoo, as I believe that is how he likes us to describe it. So come pick his brain. This is one of the perks of joining a place that's got all these different interesting people on the wrecking crew here, is everyone's got their areas of expertise and strength that we can help you with your game. But again, I want to reinforce this point that Joe said earlier, and then we'll wrap this up, which is that it does happen to everybody. It's part of being a poker player. And, there are parts of poker play that are just not going to be profitable for everybody, like playing out of the blinds. We all play out of the blinds. We all lose money playing out of the blinds. Would it be better if we never had to play out of the blinds? It sure would. But guess what? That's never going to happen. And having these, lapses of judgment or lapses of focus or, whatever you want to call it, or however you define this kind of tilt that's affecting you, whoever you are out there with these different kinds of tilt, that's anything that's affecting your play. It's very natural, and don't beat yourself up, but don't just give up either. There are ways that you can arm yourself against these and make them smaller mistakes or less frequent mistakes. And that's how you're going to win more money playing poker, is just making fewer mistakes or smaller mistakes than your opponent. So good luck with that. It sounds easier than it is, but find some aids. And again, if I put this request out last year, if you're listening, send me an email, jim@rec.poker, and let me know what has helped you. What are the little checklist items or the mantras or the routines or the keywords or whatever it is that's helped you in the past to bridge this? Maybe we can put it in the forums, and our correspondent Chris can use some of those tips to better their own play at the table. So thank you, Chris, and thank you, Lawrence, if that's your name, Lawrence, from last week, for writing in. We had just two of the fantastic folks we met at Running Aces that trip. And of course, thanks to the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. Thanks to Joe, Taylor, and Ben for rapping with me on this Monday night about all this stuff. And thanks to you, the listeners. I hope we get to meet up with all of you on a road trip sometime soon. Check us out. In the meantime, thanks for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast.